Have you ever experienced a strange and unsettling paradox? The deeper your understanding of the world becomes, the more distant you feel from the people inhabiting it. It is a haunting sensation, a feeling that as your mind expands, your social circle inevitably shrinks. It's as if clarity comes at the cost of connection. You might find yourself in a room full of people, yet feel entirely alone, separated by an invisible chasm of perception. When you try to bridge that gap, when you attempt to articulate the complex realities you see, you are often met not with curiosity, but with blank stares, awkward silences, or swift dismissals. This phenomenon is not merely a product of your imagination, nor is it a sign of social ineptitude. History, psychology, and philosophy all converge to tell us a hard truth. Society has always harbored a deep-seated fear of deep thinkers. This fear is not born because the thinker is wrong. Often, it is precisely because they are right. They perceive the cracks in the foundation that others are desperately trying to ignore. From the trial of Socrates to the isolation of Nietzsche, from the persecution of Galileo to the tragedy of Tesla, the narrative of human history is paved with the suffering of its most brilliant minds. These individuals were ridiculed, silenced, and pushed to the margins, not because they lacked intelligence, but because their intelligence made the collective uncomfortable. Arthur Schopenhauer, perhaps one of the most brutally honest philosophers to ever live, argued that high intelligence is rarely a gift in the traditional sense. He viewed it as a curse, a burden that isolates the holder. For Schopenhauer, the majority of humanity lives under a veil of comforting illusions. When a person possesses the intellect to pierce through that veil, they do not find happiness, they find alienation. To see the world clearly is to see its flaws, its suffering, and its inherent futility. This clarity creates a barrier. How can one engage in the trivialities of polite society when one is preoccupied with the nature of existence? But why is this dynamic so pervasive? Why does society instinctively resist those who think differently? The answer is not found in logic, but deep within the primitive wiring of human psychology. To understand this hostility, we must examine how human beings process different forms of superiority. Consider for a moment your reaction to physical strength. When you stand beside someone who is an elite athlete, physically imposing and capable, you generally do not feel a sense of personal insult. You might admire their discipline. You might feel a sense of safety knowing they are capable of protection. Similarly, when you encounter someone of immense wealth, the reaction is often one of fascination or envy. You might desire what they have, but their bank account does not necessarily negate your own identity. However, intellectual superiority triggers a fundamentally different and more volatile reaction. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as the mirror effect. A deep thinker does not simply introduce new information into a conversation. By their very nature, they act as a reflective surface. When a person of high intellect questions a norm, analyzes a belief system, or deconstructs a comfortable lie, they are unknowingly holding up a mirror to the people around them. In this mirror, others do not see the thinker. They see their own limitations. They see their lack of curiosity, their acceptance of dogma, and the shallowness of their own engagement with the world. People can forgive you for being rich. They can forgive you for being beautiful. But they rarely forgive you for making them feel unintelligent. The root of this discomfort lies in how we construct our identities. Attributes like physical beauty, strength, or material wealth are often viewed as external assets, things we have. But our thoughts, our beliefs, and our understanding of the world are things we are. They constitute the core of our self. Therefore, when a deep thinker challenges a widely held belief or exposes a logical fallacy, it is not received as a mere correction of facts. It is perceived as a direct assault on the ego. It feels like an attack on the listener's identity. The average person, when confronted with a mind that operates on a deeper, more rigorous level, often feels stripped of their intellectual defenses. Instead of responding with admiration as they might to a strong or wealthy person, they respond with defensiveness. This reaction is a defense mechanism. The human ego is fragile and will go to extraordinary lengths to protect itself from the discomfort of inadequacy. When a deep thinker enters the room, the collective ego of the group senses a threat. The instinctive response is to neutralize that threat. This is why, in casual social settings, if you try to steer a conversation toward philosophy, existential risk, or systemic analysis, you will witness a palpable shift in the atmosphere. People will check their phones, make jokes to break the tension, or aggressively change the subject back to surface-level chatter, like the weather, sports, or celebrity gossip. This brings us to a painful realization for many intellectuals. In the social marketplace, confidence is currency, while nuance is a liability. Studies in social psychology have repeatedly shown that in group settings, people are naturally drawn to those who project certainty, even if that certainty is unearned or factually incorrect. We are a species that craves security, and certainty feels safe. Deep thinkers, conversely, rarely deal in absolutes. They deal in probabilities, complexities, and gray areas. They ask why and how, rather than simply accepting what. This nuance is often mistaken for hesitation or lack of confidence. Consequently, the loud, charismatic simplifier, the populist leader, the motivational speaker with catchy slogans, the influencer with absolute opinions will almost always garner more social influence than the quiet, contemplative thinker who sees the world in all its messy complexity. The mirror effect ultimately reveals a sad truth about social dynamics. We prefer the person who validates our ignorance over the person who illuminates it. The deep thinker forces us to look at things we would rather ignore, and for that transgression, they are pushed to the fringes, leaving them to wonder why their quest for truth has resulted in a sentence of solitude. The resistance to deep thinking is not merely a social inconvenience or a matter of fragile egos. It is rooted in something far more ancient and fundamental. To understand why intelligence is so often met with hostility, we must look beyond psychology and peer into the very biology of the human brain. The rejection of the intellectual is not just a cultural phenomenon, but a biological imperative that has been hardwired into us over hundreds of thousands of years. Modern neuroscience confirms what philosophers have suspected for centuries, that the human brain does not treat intellectual threats differently from physical ones. When a person is confronted with a complex idea that challenges their worldview, or when they feel intellectually outmatched in a conversation, their brain does not respond with curiosity. Instead, the amygdala, the primitive region of the brain responsible for fear and threat detection, lights up with alarm. In a modern context, a deep conversation is harmless, but the brain is running on ancient software. To the amygdala, the embarrassment of not knowing an answer or the discomfort of having one's core beliefs questioned registers as a visceral danger. This reaction triggers a cascade of stress hormones, preparing the body for a fight-or-flight response. This is why debate about politics, religion, or philosophy can rapidly devolve into shouting matches or icy silence. The participants are not just disagreeing, they are experiencing a biological survival response. The deep thinker, often unknowingly, is triggering the same fear circuits in their peers that would be activated by the sight of a predator in the brush. The intellectual challenge feels like a physical assault because, to the brain, the preservation of one's internal model of reality is as critical as the preservation of the body. This biological reaction makes sense only when we consider the environment in which the human mind evolved. For the vast majority of human history, survival did not depend on being the most innovative or the most truthful individual in the group. It depended on social cohesion. Our ancestors lived in small, tight-knit tribes where relying on one another was the only defense against starvation, predators, and the elements. In such a world, standing out was dangerous. To be different was to risk ostracization, and to be ostracized was essentially a death sentence. Isolation meant vulnerability. Therefore, the human brain evolved to prioritize social acceptance over intellectual pursuit. We are wired to fit in, to harmonize, and to echo the sentiments of the tribe, not to question them. When a highly intelligent person enters a social group today and begins to deconstruct social norms or question established traditions, they are effectively disrupting the tribal balance. They are introducing uncertainty into a system that relies on predictability for safety. Even if their ideas are brilliant, their presence signals instability. The group's collective unconscious perceives the thinker not as a visionary, but as a potential threat to the social order. This explains why deep thinkers often feel a profound sense of isolation that seems disproportionate to the situation. It is not necessarily that they lack social skills, as is often assumed, but rather that their very nature is discordant with the evolutionary mandate of conformity. They're playing a game of truth in a world designed for the game of survival. This dynamic becomes even more complex when we examine the context in which these interactions occur. A fascinating study conducted at Stanford University in 2021 revealed that the projection of intelligence is highly context-dependent. The researchers found that when people interact with an intellectual in a private, one-on-one setting, they often feel less threatened and more open to the exchange of ideas. In intimacy, there is no audience, and therefore the social stakes are lower. However, as soon as that same interaction is moved to a group setting, the threat response spikes dramatically. In a group, the dynamic shifts from connection to status. In the presence of others, people are acutely aware of their social standing. If an individual feels outshined by a deep thinker in front of their peers, the shame is amplified. The fear of being perceived as less intelligent or less competent triggers an instinctive drive to regain status. This is often achieved by undermining the thinker, dismissing their ideas as too serious or boring, or collectively freezing them out of the conversation. It is a protective maneuver. The group closes ranks to protect the hierarchy, and the deep thinker is left on the outside. This is why many intellectuals find that they can have profound, life-changing conversations with individuals in private, only to find those same individuals distant or dismissive when they meet in a public sphere. The social mask goes back on, and the tribe asserts its dominance over the individual. Furthermore, this resistance is compounded by several cognitive biases that distort how we process information and perceive competence. The most famous of these is the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It creates a friction where those who know the least often speak with the most confidence, while those who understand the nuance and complexity of a subject, the deep thinkers, are often plagued by doubt. The ignorant are armored in certainty, while the wise are vulnerable in their skepticism. This makes it incredibly difficult for a deep thinker to break through. When they try to introduce a complex truth, they are often shouted down by simplistic but confident falsehoods. Added to this is the status quo bias, a preference for the current state of affairs. The human brain is a cognitive miser. It seeks to conserve energy. Processing new, complex, or revolutionary ideas requires significant metabolic and mental effort. Accepting a new truth might mean rewriting one's entire understanding of the world, admitting past mistakes, or changing one's behavior. It is far easier, energetically and psychologically, to reject the new idea and cling to the familiar. This is why society resists change so fiercely. It is not just stubbornness, it is an economic decision made by the brain to avoid the cost of thinking deeply. Perhaps the most frustrating barrier for the deep thinker is the backfire effect. This phenomenon occurs when, upon being presented with evidence that contradicts their beliefs, people do not change their minds, but instead double down on their original convictions. The contradictory evidence feels like a threat to their identity, causing them to retreat further into their established worldview. For a deep thinker who values truth above all else, this is baffling. They offer facts, logic, and insight, expecting these things to be valued, but instead they are met with increased hostility. The more they try to explain, the more the other person resists. It is a tragic irony. The very attempt to share understanding creates a deeper divide. In the digital age, these evolutionary and psychological tendencies have been weaponized by technology. We have built systems that amplify our worst tribal instincts. Social media algorithms are designed to prioritize engagement, and nothing engages the human brain quite like outrage and confirmation bias. Nuanced, well-reasoned arguments do not go viral. They require time to read and effort to understand. What goes viral are emotional triggers, sound bites, and content that validates what we already feel. The digital landscape has created a global tribe that rewards simplicity and punishes depth. In this environment, the deep thinker is fighting a losing battle against a machine optimized for shallowness. The complex reality of the world is compressed into memes and headlines, and those who try to expand the conversation are often buried under the weight of the algorithm. Consequently, the rejection of intelligence is a multi-layered phenomenon. It is biological, stemming from our amygdala's fear response. It is evolutionary, rooted in the survival necessity of tribal conformity. It is social, driven by status anxiety and group dynamics. And it is cognitive, reinforced by biases that protect our egos from the pain of being wrong. The deep thinker stands against all these forces, often alone, wondering why their gift of insight feels so much like a burden. But understanding these forces is the first step in navigating them. It reveals that the isolation is not a personal failure, but a systemic inevitability of being a creature of truth in a world built for comfort. If society is biologically wired to resist the outlier, it is also culturally constructed to suppress the deep thinker, a reality that becomes painfully clear when we examine the fundamental values that drive human civilization. The rejection of intelligence is not merely an accident of biology, it is a feature of the social machinery we have built. At the heart of this rejection lies a simple, uncomfortable truth. The world does not operate on the pursuit of truth, but on the pursuit of comfort. Civilization is an engine designed to maximize stability and predictability, and nothing threatens stability quite like a mind that refuses to stop questioning. This is where the friction between the individual and the collective becomes most abrasive. While the deep thinker is often driven by an insatiable need to understand the underlying mechanics of reality, society is driven by the need to maintain the illusion that everything is fine. To understand this dynamic, we must turn again to the philosophy of Arthur Schopenhauer, who offered perhaps the bleakest yet most accurate diagnosis of the intellectual's plight. Schopenhauer did not view the world as a rational place governed by logic. Instead, he saw it as the manifestation of a blind, irrational force he called the will. a relentless drive for survival, reproduction, and satisfaction. For the vast majority of humanity, life is dictated by this will to live. People are biologically and psychologically programmed to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and secure their place within the herd. They construct elaborate social games, chase material wealth, and engage in comforting rituals to distract themselves from the harsh realities of existence. However, the deep thinker operates under a different, often contradictory drive, the will to truth. This is the fundamental disconnect. While the majority are content to accept the world as it appears, finding happiness in the surface-level dance of daily life, the intellectual is cursed with the desire to peer behind the curtain. They cannot simply enjoy the play. They must understand how the stage is built, who is pulling the strings, and why the script was written in the first place. This analytical nature makes it nearly impossible for them to participate in the normal activities that bind society together. Small talk, for instance, becomes an excruciating exercise in futility. To a mind occupied with the nature of consciousness, the origins of the universe, or the systemic failures of political structures, a conversation about the weather or celebrity gossip is not just boring, it is painfully alienating. Schopenhauer argued that this is why high intelligence is inextricably linked to sorrow. He believed that the smarter a person is, the more they will struggle to connect with others, because they see through the polite deceptions that lubricate social interaction. Most social bonds are forged through shared illusions and the mutual agreement to ignore certain uncomfortable truths. When a deep thinker enters this space, they are like a sober person at a drunken party. They perceive the sloppiness, the incoherence, and the artificiality of the revelry. They see the status games being played, the subtle manipulations, and the hollow nature of the pursuit. Because they cannot genuinely participate in these games without betraying their own nature, they withdraw. This withdrawal is often misinterpreted by society as arrogance or aloofness, when in reality it is a form of existential exhaustion. This philosophical alienation is reinforced by the very institutions that claim to value intelligence. We are told from a young age that schools are temples of learning, designed to cultivate the mind. Yet, a closer look reveals that the modern education system is less about creating independent thinkers and more about manufacturing obedient workers. The structure of the classroom, the rows of desks, the ringing of bells, the standardized testing is a relic of the industrial age, designed to produce conformity. Students who memorize facts and repeat them on command are rewarded with high grades and praise. In contrast, the student who challenges the teacher, who asks why instead of what, or who offers a creative solution that deviates from the curriculum, is often viewed as a disruption. The deep thinker in a traditional school setting quickly learns a painful lesson. Intelligence is only valued when it follows the rules. Critical thinking is praised in theory but punished in practice. This conditioning continues into the workplace, where the corporate world operates on a similar principle of compliance. Companies often claim to want innovation and out-of-the-box thinking, but the reality of corporate hierarchy is designed to protect the status quo. The employee who questions the efficiency of a long-standing process or points out the logical fallacies in a management strategy is rarely celebrated. Instead, they are seen as difficult or not a culture fit. The corporate ladder is climbed not by those who think the most deeply, but by those who navigate the social politics the most smoothly. The deep thinker, who values competence over charisma and truth over politeness, often finds themselves stalled, watching less capable but more compliant peers surpass them. This systemic preference for mediocrity over depth extends into the political and cultural spheres as well. In a democracy, the most successful leaders are rarely the most intellectual. A politician who speaks in nuanced paragraphs, who acknowledges the complexity of an issue and admits that there are no easy answers, is almost certain to lose to a populist who shouts simple, emotionally charged slogans. The human brain, seeking to conserve energy, prefers the easy lie to the hard truth. We gravitate toward leaders who tell us what we want to hear, that we are right, that our problems are caused by them, and that the solution is simple. The deep thinker who refuses to offer false hope or simplistic solutions is dismissed as elitist or out of touch. The tragedy of the modern age is that we have built a technological infrastructure that exacerbates this rejection of depth. The internet, which once promised to be a library of Alexandria for the entire world, has largely mutated into a machine for distraction. Social media algorithms are the ultimate enforcers of the status quo bias. They are mathematically designed to feed us content that reinforces our existing beliefs and triggers immediate emotional reactions. In this digital ecosystem, a thoughtful, well-reasoned essay stands no chance against a 15-second video designed to outrage or entertain. The attention economy has monetized our distraction, creating a culture where engagement is the only metric that matters. Depth requires time, silence, and focus. Three things that the modern world is aggressively engineering out of existence. As a result, the deep thinker finds themselves in a world that is increasingly hostile to their mode of existence. They are surrounded by a cacophony of noise, a relentless stream of trivial information, and a society that demands constant, shallow connectivity. The pressure to conform is immense. To fit in, the intellectual must often shrink themselves, dimming their light to avoid blinding others. They learn to nod along to conversations they find mindless, to laugh at jokes they find unfunny, and to suppress the burning questions that keep them awake at night. This act of self-censorship is the heaviest burden of all. It creates a split in the psyche, the public self, which performs the rituals of normalcy, and the private self, which starves for genuine connection. Schopenhauer's observation that a high degree of intellect tends to make a man unsocial was not a judgment of the man, but an indictment of the society. It suggests that the loneliness of the deep thinker is not a personal failure, but a structural inevitability. We live in a civilization that has prioritized the will to live, the drive for comfort, security, and pleasure over the will to truth. Until that fundamental value structure changes, the deep thinker will always be an outsider, looking in through the glass, wondering why the world is so content to live in the shallows when there is an entire ocean of meaning left unexplored. The isolation is the price of the ticket for seeing the world as it actually is, rather than how we wish it to be. The rejection of the deep thinker is not a modern anomaly born of social media or corporate culture. It is, in fact, one of the most consistent and tragic patterns in the human story. If we look back through the centuries, we find that the timeline of human progress is paved with the suffering of those who dared to see further than their contemporaries. History serves as a grim testament to the fact that society does not merely ignore deep thinkers. It often actively seeks to destroy them. The individuals we now revere as the pillars of civilization, the scientists, philosophers, and visionaries whose faces adorn our currency and whose names grace our universities were, in their own time, often treated as pariahs, heretics, or madmen. This creates a haunting paradox. We worship the statues of people we would have likely persecuted had we lived alongside them. Consider the fate of Socrates, the man often credited as the father of Western philosophy. He did not seek wealth or political power. His only goal was to encourage the youth of Athens to think for themselves, to question the nature of virtue, justice, and the gods. He described himself as a gadfly, a stinging insect sent to wake a sluggish horse. But Athens, a city that prided itself on democracy and wisdom, could not tolerate the discomfort he provoked. By forcing people to examine their own ignorance, Socrates humiliated the powerful and unsettled the masses. He was not celebrated for his wisdom. He was put on trial for corrupting the youth and impiety. When given the choice to stop his questioning or face death, he chose the hemlock, famously declaring that the unexamined life is not worth living. His execution was not a mistake of justice. It was a deliberate act of social hygiene by a community that preferred the comfort of tradition over the agony of truth. Centuries later, the same tragedy played out in the realm of science with Galileo Galilei. His crime was not violence or theft, but the simple observation that the earth revolved around the sun. This truth, which seems banal to a modern child, was a radical assault on the entire power structure of the Catholic Church and the anthropocentric worldview of the time. To accept Galileo's findings meant accepting that humanity was not the literal center of the universe, a psychological demotion that the authorities could not abide. The Church, which held a monopoly on truth, branded him a heretic. The greatest scientific mind of his generation was forced to recant his own discoveries on his knees, under the threat of torture, and spent the remaining years of his life under house arrest. His story is a stark reminder that when intelligence clashes with dogma, dogma almost always wins in the short term, even if truth eventually triumphs in the long run. The pattern continues into the industrial age with figures like Nikola Tesla. Tesla was not merely an inventor. He was a visionary who imagined a world liberated by free, wireless energy. His mind operated on a frequency that the capitalist structures of his time could not comprehend or control. While his rival, Thomas Edison, was a shrewd businessman who understood how to monetize invention, Tesla was driven by a utopian ideal. He wanted to elevate humanity, not just profit from it. This noble ambition became his undoing. The financiers of the era, particularly J.P. Morgan, saw his idea of free energy not as a gift to the world, but as a threat to their monopolies. They crushed him. Tesla, the man who gave us the alternating current that powers the modern world, died alone, destitute, and largely forgotten in a small hotel room in New York City. Society was happy to take his inventions, but it had no place for his spirit. Perhaps the most heartbreaking example of this rejection is Alan Turing, the brilliant mathematician who cracked the Enigma code and effectively shortened World War II by years, saving millions of lives. Turing was the father of theoretical computer science and artificial intelligence, a mind of singular genius. Yet his contributions to the survival of the free world could not save him from the prejudices of his society. In the 1950s, he was persecuted not for his ideas, but for his identity. Convicted of gross indecency for being gay, he was forced by the British government to undergo chemical castration. The shame and physical torment led to his tragic death at just 41 years old. It took decades for the government to issue an apology, a hollow gesture to a man whose mind was extinguished by the very society he helped save. Even further back, we see the violent rejection of female intellect in the story of Hypatia of Alexandria. A philosopher, astronomer, and mathematician in a time when women were often relegated to the shadows, she was a beacon of reason in a darkening world. Her teachings on Neoplatonism and scientific inquiry drew students from all over the empire, but her prominence drew the ire of religious zealots. in 415 AD, a mob, threatened by her influence and her refusal to convert to their dogma, dragged her from her carriage and brutally murdered her. Her death marked the symbolic end of classical antiquity and the beginning of a long intellectual winter. Hypatia's fate illustrates a terrifying truth. The mob does not debate, it destroys. When the collective feels its foundational myths are threatened by a superior intellect, the response is often visceral and violent. These historical case studies reveal a consistent mechanism at play. Society does not fear intelligence in the abstract. It fears what intelligence represents: change. Every deep thinker is, by definition, a destabilizing force. They introduce new variables into the equation of life. They challenge the status quo, whether it be religious, scientific, economic, or social. For the average person, whose life is built on the stability of these structures, the deep thinker is a source of anxiety. We are creatures of habit, and we find safety in the familiar. The genius who points out that our habits are destructive, or that our safety is an illusion, is not greeted as a savior, but as a saboteur. This is the time lag of acceptance. Society operates on a delay. It resists the visionary in the present, only to canonize them in the future once their ideas have become safe, normalized, and profitable. We love the revolutionary only after the revolution is over and won. We admire the disruptor only after the dust has settled. This leaves the deep thinker in a painful temporal exile. They are living in the future, while everyone around them is clinging to the past. They are, as Nietzsche famously put it, born posthumously. Their true peers are not their neighbors or colleagues, but the unborn generations who will one day take their radical ideas for granted. So, if you feel isolated by your thoughts, if you feel that your attempts to engage deeply are met with resistance, realize that you are part of a lineage. You are walking the same lonely path as the greatest minds in history. The rejection you feel is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are functioning correctly in a dysfunctionally stagnant world. The friction you experience is simply the heat generated by a mind moving faster than the society that surrounds it. But this realization, while validating, does not solve the problem of loneliness. It merely explains it. The question remains, knowing that society is wired to reject you, and that history confirms this rejection, how does one live a fulfilling life? Is the deep thinker doomed to misery, or is there a way to turn this isolation into a source of strength? The answer lies in reframing the very concept of solitude, transforming it from a prison into a sanctuary.